Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the reactor display. The numbers looked good, better than they had in weeks. He allowed himself a small grunt of satisfaction. Kepler Station might be at the edge of nowhere, but its systems ran smooth under his care. The station floated in the darkness of space, far from Earth and far from any major colonies. It served as a refueling stop for cargo ships and the occasional passenger transport. Nothing exciting ever happened here, and that was exactly why Jake had chosen this place. After losing his wife and daughter in a transport crash 3 years ago, he wanted silence. He wanted to work with machines that made sense, that followed rules, that never left you when you needed them most. His communicator beeped. Jake ignored it. Probably Lisa Ford, the station commander, asking about the water recyclers again. That woman worried too much about everything. The recyclers were fine. Everything was fine. The communicator beeped again, more insistent this time. Jake sighed and tapped the device. Morrison here. What's the problem? Lisa's voice came through, tight with tension. Jake, get to the command center now. Something in her tone made Jake's stomach drop. Lisa never sounded like that. She was always calm, always in control. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the lift, moving faster than he had in months. The command center was chaos when he arrived. Officers shouted coordinates and status reports. The main screen showed dozens of red contacts approaching the station. Jake had seen that screen peaceful and empty for 2 years straight. Now it looked like someone had spilled blood across it. What am I looking at? Jake asked. Lisa turned to him. Her face was pale. Vraxian fleet. 37 ships, military class. They'll be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Jake felt his mouth go dry. The Vraxians. Everyone in human space had heard about them. Reptilian aliens who conquered systems the way humans breathed. They'd been pushing into this sector for months, but nobody thought they'd come this far this fast. Where's our defense fleet? Jake asked. 2 days away at best, Lisa said. I've sent distress signals, but we're on our own. The station shook. Not hard, just a gentle tremor that most people wouldn't notice. But Jake felt it in his bones. He'd built half the systems on this station with his own hands. He knew every vibration, every hum. They're scanning us, one of the officers reported. Active targeting sweeps. Lisa straightened her uniform. All personnel to evacuation stations. Civilians first, then non-essential crew. We'll buy as much time as we can. Jake watched the screen as the red contacts grew closer. The station had 12 security officers with basic weapons. Against a Vraxian fleet, they might as well throw rocks. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur. Jake found himself pushed toward the evacuation bay along with dozens of other civilians. People clutched bags and children, their faces showing the same fear he felt twisting in his gut. The station shook again, harder this time. They're firing warning shots, someone said. Trying to scare us, it was working. Jake reached the evacuation bay and stopped. In front of him, families crowded into the escape shuttles. A mother held her young son close, whispering that everything would be okay. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. Same age his daughter would have been. Jake stepped back from the line. Sir, you need to board, a security officer said, pointing at the shuttle. The reactors, Jake said. If the Vraxians hit them, the explosion will catch the shuttles before they can jump to light speed. The officer blinked. What? I need to put the reactors in safe mode. Lock down the fuel systems, otherwise everyone dies. Jake was already moving back toward the corridor. Wait! The commander ordered everyone to evacuate, but Jake was running now. Back through the shaking corridors, back toward engineering. Behind him, he heard the officer shouting into his comm, but Jake didn't care. He knew the station. He knew what would happen if those reactors took a direct hit with all that antimatter fuel still active. He reached engineering just as another tremor rocked the station. The lights flickered. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Jake's fingers flew across the control panels. He initiated the shutdown sequence, routing power to backup systems, venting excess fuel into shielded storage pods. The work was automatic, muscle memory from 1,000 drills. His mind raced ahead, calculating blast radii and shuttle trajectories. The station's intercom crackled to life. Lisa's voice echoed through engineering. All personnel, this is Commander Ford. Vraxian boarding parties have breached the outer hull. Repeat, we have been boarded. All remaining security to sectors 5 and 7. Everyone else get to the shuttles now. Jake finished the last sequence. The reactors were safe. The shuttles could escape without fear of a catastrophic explosion. He turned toward the door, ready to run for the last evacuation ship. Then he stopped. Through the window that looked out into the main corridor, Jake saw them, Vraxians. 3 of them moving in formation, their reptilian forms covered in dark armor. They carried weapons that looked like they could punch through steel. They moved with purpose, checking each door, each junction. Jake backed away from the window, his heart pounding. He'd waited too long. The last shuttle would be gone by now. He was trapped in engineering with an alien assault force between him and any escape route. He looked around the engineering bay. This had been his home for 2 years. He knew every panel, every circuit, every pipe. The station's entire infrastructure ran through this room. Power, life support, gravity, communications, everything. Jake's fear began to change into something else, something hot and sharp. They'd taken his first home. His wife and daughter gone in an instant because of a transport malfunction. Now these aliens wanted to take this home too. This collection of metal and machines that he'd kept running, that he'd poured his grief and his skills into. He looked down at his hands. No weapons, no training. Just calluses and scars from years of working with tools and engines. Jake walked slowly to the main engineering console. His hands steady now, he pulled up the station system map. Every corridor, every vent, every power junction lit up before him. The Vraxians were out there, probably thinking they'd already won. They didn't know they'd just trapped themselves in a station with an engineer who had nothing left to lose. Jake's fingers moved across the controls. His face set in a hard line. He pulled up the atmospheric controls for Sector 5. His finger hovered over the vent command. "Okay," he said quietly to the empty room. "Let's see how you like my home." He pressed the button. The atmosphere in Sector 5 vented into space in less than 3 seconds. Jake watched on his monitor as the Vraxian squad that had been sweeping that section suddenly found themselves without air. Their armor protected them, but the sudden decompression sent them tumbling. One smashed into a wall hard enough that Jake saw the armor crack. Jake felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a cold calculation of what worked and what didn't. He studied the monitor feeds, counting the aliens. At least 40 had boarded the station. They moved in organized groups, checking rooms, securing junctions. Professional soldiers doing their job. Jake pulled up the personnel files for the security team. 11 officers still showed active life signs. They'd barricaded themselves in the armory in Sector 7. Smart, but they wouldn't last long. Jake switched his attention to the Vraxian command structure. They had to have a leader, someone coordinating the attack. He cycled through the communication frequencies until he found it. Alien voices, harsh and clicking, speaking in their own language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he understood tone. Orders being given. Reports being made. One voice stood out, deeper than the others, speaking less but with authority. That would be the commander. Jake made a mental note of the frequency and went back to his monitors. A Vraxian patrol was approaching engineering. 4 soldiers moving carefully, weapons ready. They'd be at his door in less than a minute. He pulled up the corridor's power grid. The lighting system ran on independent circuits. So did the gravity plating. Jake's fingers danced across the controls. He cut the lights in that corridor, then killed the gravity. On the monitor, he watched the Vraxians suddenly float upward in complete darkness. Their helmet lights came on, beams cutting through the black. But without gravity, they had nothing to push against. They drifted helplessly, trying to grab onto walls that were just out of reach. Jake restored gravity at triple strength. The Vraxians slammed into the floor. Their armor clanked against metal. One didn't get up. The others struggled under the weight, their movement slow and clumsy. Jake shut the blast doors at both ends of the corridor, trapping them. He turned his attention to the next group. The Vraxians were learning, though. Jake watched them adapt. They started moving in pairs, one watching ahead while the other watched behind. They avoided corridors with obvious choke points. They marked their paths so they wouldn't get lost in the station's maze of passages. Good soldiers. Jake respected that even as he planned their deaths. He spent the next hour making the station fight them. A coolant leak here, an electrical fire there, doors that sealed shut, trapping squads in sections with no air. Maintenance robots reprogrammed to spark and explode near enemy positions. Nothing was technically a weapon. Everything was just a malfunction. Just systems breaking down under stress. But Jake knew better. Every trap was calculated. Every accident was planned. The Vraxian commander, the one with the deep voice, started barking orders more frequently. Jake could hear the frustration even through the alien language. They'd expected to take a defenseless refueling station. Instead, the station itself was killing them. Jake found himself in a rhythm. Monitor, plan, execute. Monitor, plan, execute. His hands never stopped moving. His eyes never left the screens. He drank recycled coffee that tasted like metal and ate protein bars without noticing the flavor. Time became fluid. Was it hours, days? Jake didn't know. Didn't care. There was only the next trap, the next system to weaponize, the next group of aliens to stop. He was so focused that he almost missed the warning. A proximity alert in one of the service tunnels. Someone was in the maintenance shaft, heading toward engineering from below. The motion sensors showed one figure, smaller than the Vraxian soldiers. Jake pulled up the camera feed, but the tunnel was too dark.
He enhanced the image.
Still nothing clear, just a shape moving through the shaft with surprising speed. The figure reached a junction and paused. In the faint emergency lighting, Jake finally got a clear look. Not a Vraxian, something else. Smaller, barely armored. It carried no weapon. It looked young, frightened. A technician maybe, or a junior crew member, not a warrior. The young alien looked around, clearly lost. It touched its helmet, probably trying to call for help. When no answer came, it curled up in the junction, making itself small. Jake watched it for a long moment. His finger hovered over the controls. He could seal that junction, fill it with coolant. The young alien would freeze in seconds, easy, clean. Jake's hand pulled back. He switched off the camera feed and focused on other sections. The young alien wasn't a threat. It was just scared. Just trying to survive like everyone else. Jake shook his head, clearing the thought. He couldn't afford sympathy, not now. Not when 40 armed soldiers were hunting through his station. He pulled up the environmental controls for the main hangar. The Vraxian ships were docked there, taking on supplies. Their crews moved back and forth, confident and casual. They thought the station was theirs. Jake smiled for the first time in hours. It wasn't a nice smile. He opened all the external hangar doors at once. Atmosphere rushed out in a howling wind. Cargo containers tumbled into space. The Vraxian crews scrambled for their ships, fighting against the decompression. 3 of them didn't make it. Jake watched their bodies spiral away into the darkness. Alarms shrieked across the station. The Vraxian commander's voice rose above the chaos, sharp with anger. Orders crackled over the frequency. The tone had changed. They weren't hunting a saboteur anymore. They were angry. Good, Jake thought. Angry people made mistakes. The Vraxians regrouped in the main corridor hub, a large junction that connected all the major sectors. Jake counted 32 soldiers gathering there, plus their commander. He could see the leader now on the monitor, bigger than the others with red markings on the armor. The commander gestured sharply, pointing at different corridors, dividing the troops into new search patterns. They were going to sweep the entire station, section by section. No more caution, just overwhelming force. Jake looked at the hub on his schematic. It sat directly below the main water recycling plant. Thousands of gallons of water, held in tanks on the level above. The tanks were designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and pressure changes, but they weren't designed to be deliberately breached from below. Jake pulled up the maintenance protocols for the recycling plant. There was an emergency dump function, meant to jettison contaminated water. It required 3 separate confirmations and a manual override. Jake provided all 3 confirmations. He activated the manual override. On the monitor, the Vraxian commander was giving orders when the ceiling above them exploded. Thousands of gallons of water crashed down on the assembled troops. The force of it knocked them off their feet. Armor meant nothing against that much weight, that much pressure. The water kept coming, flooding the hub. The Vraxians thrashed and struggled. Some managed to grab onto railings. Others were swept down corridors by the current. Jake closed all the doors leading out of the hub. The water had nowhere to go. It rose quickly, filling the space. He watched the life signs on his monitor. One by one, they began to flicker out. The commander's voice came over the frequency one last time. Not orders now. Just a roar of rage and defiance, then silence. Jake sat back in his chair. His hands were shaking. 32 life signs had just gone dark on his screen. He'd killed them. Not in combat. Not in self-defense. He'd drowned them like rats in a trap. He waited for the guilt to come. For the horror. For something. All he felt was tired. Jake looked at the station schematic. 8 Vraxians left, scattered across different sections. They'd be more careful now. More dangerous. But there were only 8. He could do this. He could clear his home. Jake pulled up the next set of schematics and began to plan. Jake Morrison had been awake for 36 hours straight. His eyes burned, his back ached from sitting at the console. But he couldn't stop. Not while 8 Vraxian soldiers still stalked through his station. He'd been tracking them for hours. They'd learned from their losses. They stayed away from large open spaces. They avoided corridors with too many systems he could manipulate. They moved in pairs now, always covering each other. Smart. Adaptive. It made Jake's job harder. One pair had found the security team's position in the armory. Jake watched on the monitors as the 2 Vraxians set up outside the sealed blast door. They pulled equipment from their packs, cutting tools. They were going to break in. Jake couldn't let that happen. The 11 security officers inside were the only other humans still alive on the station. He owed them a chance. He studied the area around the armory. The corridor outside ran adjacent to a power conduit, one of the main lines that fed electricity to half the station. If that conduit ruptured, everything in that corridor would be flooded with enough voltage to cook anything alive. But rupturing it would also knock out life support to 3 sectors. The security team would lose their air. They'd have maybe 10 minutes in their emergency suits. Jake weighed the options. 10 minutes was enough time to reach the escape pod bay. Maybe. If they ran fast. If nothing went wrong. He pulled up the communication system and opened a channel to the armory. Security team, this is Jake Morrison in engineering. Can you hear me? Static. Then a voice. Lieutenant Dan Carter. Morrison, we thought you evacuated. What are you doing? Saving your lives. Listen carefully. In 30 seconds, I'm going to blow the power conduit outside your position. It'll take out the 2 hostiles at your door, but it'll also kill life support in your sector. You'll have 10 minutes of emergency air. Use it to reach the escape pod bay in Sector 2. Don't stop. Don't look back, understood? Silence. Then Carter's voice, tight with tension. Understood. We'll be ready. Jake counted down. His finger hovered over the command to overload the power conduit. This wasn't like venting atmosphere or cutting gravity. This was deliberately destroying part of the station. His station. The place he'd maintained and repaired for 2 years. He pressed the command. The conduit exploded in a shower of sparks and arcing electricity. The 2 Vraxians outside the armory door never had a chance. The voltage hit them before they could react. Their armor conducted the current. They went rigid, then collapsed. The lights went out in 3 sectors. Emergency systems kicked in. Red lighting bathed the corridors. Jake switched to the armory camera. The security team burst through the door, weapons ready. They saw the dead Vraxians and didn't stop to question their luck. Carter led them at a run toward Sector 2. Jake tracked their progress on his monitors. 6 of them made it to the escape pod bay. They piled into a single pod and launched. The pod's thrusters fired, carrying them away from the station. Jake watched them go. 6 survivors. Out of a station crew of 47 people. The rest had evacuated or died. Now it was just him and 6 Vraxian soldiers. The remaining aliens regrouped in what used to be the station's mess hall. Jake watched them on the monitor. They'd taken off their helmets. He could see their faces clearly for the first time. Reptilian features, scales in patterns of green and brown. Their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. One of them was speaking into a communication device, calling their ship probably, asking for orders or reinforcements. Jake tapped into their frequency. He couldn't understand their language, but he could hear the tone. The soldier sounded uncertain, worried. Good. He watched them for a while, studying their behavior. They were checking their equipment, rationing their supplies. They looked tired, soldiers who'd expected an easy victory and found themselves in a nightmare instead. Jake felt a strange kinship with them for a moment. They were just doing their job, following orders. They probably had families back home, people who cared about them. Then he remembered the 40 people who'd died when the Vraxians opened fire on the station, the civilians who'd fled in terror. His home invaded and damaged. The moment of sympathy passed. Jake pulled up the mess hall's environmental controls. He could vent the atmosphere, quick and clean. The Vraxians would have time to put their helmets back on, but it would scatter them, force them to move. But where would they move to? Jake needed to think ahead. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He studied the station layout. The mess hall connected to the main hydroponics bay. That's where the station grew food. Rows of plants under artificial light, rich oxygen environment, plenty of places to hide. If he drove the Vraxians into hydroponics, he could seal them in, cut the power, let them sit in the dark with the plants. It wouldn't kill them, but it would contain them. Then what? Jake frowned. He couldn't keep them trapped forever. Eventually, more Vraxian ships would come. He'd seen at least 20 warships hanging in orbit when the attack started. They'd send reinforcements, unless there was no reason to send reinforcements. An idea formed in Jake's mind. Terrible, desperate, maybe insane. The station's main reactor was offline in safe mode, but the antimatter storage pods were still full. Jake had secured them when the attack started, moving them into heavily shielded containment. That antimatter was meant to fuel the station for years. It was also enough explosive power to crack a small moon. If Jake could overload the containment fields and destabilize the magnetic bottles, the antimatter would touch matter. The resulting explosion would vaporize the station and everything within 1,000 kilometers, including the Vraxian warships in orbit. Jake sat back in his chair. His hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time. From the sheer enormity of what he was considering, he could take out an entire enemy fleet. Stop their advance into this sector. Buy time for Earth's defenses to mobilize. Maybe even make the Vraxians think twice about attacking humanity again. All it would cost was his life and the lives of 6 alien soldiers who might not have wanted this war any more than he did. Jake looked around the engineering bay. This room had been his sanctuary, his escape from grief, the place where things made sense. He thought about his wife, his daughter, how they'd died in an accident that shouldn't have happened, how he'd spent 3 years hiding from the universe in this metal box floating in the dark. How the universe had found him anyway. Jake pulled up the reactor controls. The system asked for his authorization code. His fingers typed it automatically. A new screen appeared with warnings in red text. Danger. Antimatter containment. Authorized personnel only. He was authorized. He'd built this system. Jake began the override sequence. It was complex, requiring multiple confirmations. The station's computer kept warning him. This action would result in catastrophic failure. This action could not be reversed. This action would violate safety protocols. Jake confirmed each warning. His mind was calm now, clear. He wasn't choosing to die. He was choosing to make his death matter. The sequence would take 30 minutes to complete. After that, he'd have maybe 5 minutes before the magnetic containment failed. The explosion would be instant. He wouldn't feel anything. 30 minutes. Jake looked at the monitors showing the 6 Vraxian soldiers in the mess hall. They were eating now, sharing food from their rations. One of them was showing the others something on a data pad. They laughed. An alien sound, but recognizable. They had no idea what was coming. Jake stood up from the console. His legs were stiff from sitting. He walked to the window that looked out into space. Stars filled the darkness, distant suns with their own planets. Maybe their own people, their own stories. Beautiful. The communicator on his console beeped. Jake walked back and checked it. A message was coming in on the Vraxian command frequency. He patched it through to his translator program. The program struggled with the alien language but managed a rough translation. Ground team, report status. Fleet preparing to continue offensive. Require confirmation of station security. One of the Vraxians in the mess hall responded. The translator worked on his words too. Station under control. Some resistance encountered. Requesting additional teams for full sweep. Jake smiled grimly. Additional teams. More targets for his trap. He began working on a new plan. Jake Morrison watched the timer count down. 23 minutes until the antimatter containment failed. 23 minutes until the largest explosion in this sector's history. 23 minutes until he and every Vraxian ship within 1,000 kilometers became dust. He should have felt fear. Terror. Something. Instead, he felt oddly peaceful. The 6 Vraxian soldiers in the mess hall were still eating, still laughing, still alive. They'd responded to their fleet command, claiming the station was secure. More teams would be arriving soon. Good. More ships in range when the station went up. Jake pulled up the external sensors. He counted 23 Vraxian warships in orbit. Some were cruisers. Others looked like troop carriers. All of them were close enough to die when the station exploded. 23 ships. Thousands of crew members, soldiers, engineers, pilots, people with lives and families and futures. Jake's hand hesitated over the keyboard. He could still abort the sequence. Stop the countdown. Let the Vraxians have the station. Surrender. Maybe they'd let him live. Maybe they'd even respect him for his resistance. He thought about Earth, about the colonies, about all the human settlements the Vraxians would conquer if they kept advancing. How many would die if he did nothing? His hand moved away from the abort command. The communicator beeped again. Another message on the Vraxian frequency. Jake's translator program decoded it. War leader crashed to ground team. Status of human resistance? One of the soldiers responded. Eliminated or evacuated. Station is ours. Jake felt anger flare in his chest. The station was not theirs. Would never be theirs. He opened a channel on the same frequency. His computer would translate his words into the Vraxian language. He didn't care if they traced the signal. Let them find him. This is Jake Morrison, Chief Engineer of Kepler Station. You are in my home. You are not welcome here. Silence on the frequency. Then a new voice. Deeper, commanding. Human, I am War Leader Kresh of the Vraxian Collective. You have killed many of my soldiers. You have caused great damage to my forces. You are brave for a prey species. I'm not brave, Jake said. I'm angry. Your anger will not save you. More troops are coming. You will be captured. You will be interrogated. Then you will die. Jake looked at the countdown. 20 minutes left. Nobody's getting captured, Kresh, and we're all going to die. Yumi, your whole fleet. Because I'm not letting you have this station. You cannot destroy a station from engineering. The safety protocols prevent it. I built most of these safety protocols. I know exactly how to bypass them. Jake pulled up the reactor status on his screen. Right now, the antimatter containment is degrading. In 20 minutes, it'll fail completely. When it does, the explosion will reach every ship in orbit. Another pause. Longer this time. You are bluffing, am I? Check your sensors. The station's reactor signature is climbing. Magnetic containment is failing. You have 20 minutes to get your ships out of range. Maybe 19 now. Jake heard rapid conversation in the background. Orders being given. The war leader's voice came back harder now. If you do this, you will be killing yourself. I know. Why? For one station? For one battle? Your life means nothing? Jake thought about his wife's smile. His daughter's laugh. How they'd both been taken from him because of a stupid mechanical failure. How he'd hidden in this station for 3 years. Too broken to face the universe. How the universe had forced him to face it anyway. My life means exactly this, Jake said. It means you don't get to take my home. It means humanity doesn't roll over. It means you pay a price for every system you attack. Maybe that's worth something. Maybe it's not. But it's mine to choose. You are insane. Probably. Jake checked the countdown again. 18 minutes. But I'm also right. You can't take this station. All you can do is die here with me. More background noise. Arguing. The war leader was consulting with his officers. Jake could imagine the scene. Checking sensors. Running calculations. Realizing that the crazy human engineer was telling the truth. If we withdraw, Kresh said slowly, you will abort the destruction sequence. No deal. This station doesn't fall into Vraxian hands, period. Then we will stay. We will find you. We will stop you. You have 18 minutes. This station has 300 corridors, 600 rooms and a maintenance system that I've been using to kill your soldiers for 2 days. You really think you can search all of it before the antimatter goes critical? Silence. Jake pressed his advantage. Or you can leave now. Save your fleet. Live to fight another day. Your choice, war leader. The frequency went dead. Jake watched his monitors. The 6 soldiers in the mess hall were receiving new orders. They stood up quickly, grabbing their equipment. Moving with purpose toward the docking bay, the external sensors showed activity around the Vraxian ships. Engines powering up. Docking clamps releasing. They were leaving. Jake felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disappointment. Part of him had wanted them to stay, to force him to follow through, to make the choice simple, but they were leaving. The trap was working. He watched the ships pull away from the station, accelerating hard. Getting distance. They knew what was coming. They'd probably watched the containment readings on their own sensors, seen the same numbers Jake was seeing. 15 minutes until detonation. Jake pulled up the escape pod controls. There was one pod left. In the bay closest to engineering, it would take him 3 minutes to reach it. 3 minutes to suit up and launch. He'd have 12 minutes of flight time before the station exploded, enough to reach minimum safe distance. He could survive this. He could escape. The Vraxians would still lose their forward position. The station would still be denied to them. And he could live. Jake stared at the escape pod location on his screen. 3 minutes away, so close. He thought about what would come after. The questions. The investigations. The medals he didn't want. The attention. Everyone wanting to know about the engineer who held off a Vraxian fleet. He thought about going back to another station. Another engineering bay. Another set of machines to maintain. Alone with his grief again. Alone with his memories. Was that really better than this? Than going out in a blaze that would make the Vraxians remember humanity? That would buy time for Earth's defenses? Jake's hands hovered over the keyboard. Abort or continue. Live or die. Run or stay, the communicator crackled. Kresh's voice came through. Engineer Morrison, my fleet is withdrawing, but I want you to know something. Jake waited. You have earned your death today. You have fought with honor, with cunning, with fury. The collective will remember this. Will remember you. Will remember that humanity does not surrender easily. A pause. I respect you, human. I hope your gods welcome you as a warrior. The transmission ended. Jake sat back in his chair. A Vraxian war leader had just saluted him, had acknowledged him as an equal, as a warrior. Him, Jake Morrison. A grieving engineer who just wanted to be left alone, he laughed. It was a harsh sound in the empty engineering bay. Bitter and exhausted and maybe a little bit proud. 12 minutes left. Jake stood up. His body ached. His eyes burned. He was so tired. So very tired. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. The Vraxian fleet was visible now, tiny points of light accelerating away, running from one angry human and his improvised bomb. Beautiful, he thought. Absolutely beautiful. He thought about his daughter, about how she'd loved looking at stars, how she'd wanted to be a pilot when she grew up, how she'd never gotten the chance. Maybe this would give other children that chance. Other daughters, other sons. Maybe that was enough. Jake turned back to the console. He pulled up the station-wide communication system. If he was going to do this, he wanted humanity to know. Wanted them to understand. He started recording. This is Jake Morrison, chief engineer of Kepler Station. If you're hearing this, I'm already dead. The station is gone. But I took a Vraxian fleet with me. 23 warships. Thousands of enemy troops. All because one engineer decided his home was worth dying for. He paused, collecting his thoughts. I want every human who hears this to remember something. We don't need massive fleets to defend ourselves. We don't need super weapons or miracle technology. All we need is the will to fight. The refusal to give up. The fury to make every inch of ground cost the enemy blood. Jake looked at the countdown. 10 minutes, the Vraxians will come again. But now they know. Now they understand. Attacking humanity isn't free. It isn't easy. And it damn sure isn't safe. He ended the recording and set it to transmit on all frequencies when the station exploded. His last words. His last lesson to the universe. Jake Morrison sat down at his console one final time. He pulled up a picture on his personal files. His wife and daughter smiling at the camera. A family picnic from 6 years ago. before everything went wrong. "I'm coming home," he whispered. 8 minutes until detonation. Jake Morrison stared at the picture of his family. His wife Helen looked so happy in that photo. Their daughter Amy was missing her 2 front teeth. She'd been 7 years old, the same age as that little boy on the evacuation shuttle. The one clutching his mother, 7 years old. The same age Amy would have been forever. Jake's hand moved to the keyboard, not to the abort command, to something else. The escape pod system. Bay 7, 3 minutes away at a run, he could make it. Probably. Maybe. His fingers stopped. Jake closed his eyes, took a deep breath, opened them again. On the monitor, the last Vraxian ships were pulling out of range. Smart. Disciplined. They'd believed his threat. They'd run. The station was empty now except for him. Mission accomplished. The Vraxians wouldn't get Kepler Station. They'd lost troops and ships. They'd learned that humans fought back. So why was he still sitting here? Jake looked at the countdown. 7 minutes. He thought about the escape pod, about launching into space, about being picked up by a human patrol ship, about the questions they'd ask, the medals they'd try to give him, the way people would look at him. Hero, survivor, the man who stopped a Vraxian fleet, the man who couldn't save his own family but could kill thousands of aliens. His hand moved to the abort command, hovered there. The system would accept it. Even now, with 7 minutes left, he could stop the containment failure, stabilize the reactor, lock down the antimatter, stay alive, and then what? Live in another station? Hide in another engineering bay? Spend another 3 years running from his grief? Was that really living? Jake pulled his hand back. Not yet. He needed to think. Needed to be sure. 6 minutes. The communicator beeped. Jake frowned. Who would be calling now? The Vraxians were gone. The station was evacuated. He accepted the transmission. Jake Morrison? A woman's voice, human, unfamiliar. "This is Captain Beth Hayes of the Patrol Ship Defender. We picked up your transmission. We're en route to your position, but we're still 40 minutes out. Please respond." Jake stared at the communicator. 40 minutes. They wouldn't arrive in time to help. Wouldn't be close enough to attempt a rescue. They'd just be in time to see the fireworks. "I'm here," Jake said. Relief flooded the captain's voice. "Thank God. We've been tracking the Vraxian withdrawal. Whatever you did, it worked. They're running. But our sensors show your reactor is critical. You need to abort the detonation sequence and evacuate immediately. Can't abort. The containment failure is past the safe threshold, and there's no time to reach an escape pod." The lies came easily, smooth, practiced. "What do you mean there's no time? Our readings show you have 6 minutes. 5 minutes now, actually." But Jake didn't correct her. "The Vraxians damaged too many systems. The fastest route to the pod bay is blocked. I'd have to go around. Take too long." Silence on the line. Then Hayes again, quieter. "I see, I'm sorry. We'll make sure Earth knows what you did here. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten." Sacrifice. That's what she called it. Like Jake was some noble hero giving his life for humanity. The truth was messier. More selfish. He was just tired. Too tired to keep running. Too broken to face another day of pretending the grief didn't follow him everywhere. "Captain Hayes," Jake said. "Tell them it mattered. Tell them one person can make a difference. Tell them we don't need massive fleets to fight back. Just the will to stand our ground. I will. I promise." A pause. "Is there anyone you want us to contact? Family? Friends?" Jake looked at the photo on his screen. Helen and Amy, frozen in a moment of happiness that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. "No one," he said quietly. "They're already gone. 4 minutes." "Jake," Hayes said, her voice gentle. "For what it's worth, you did good. You saved a lot of lives today. You showed the Vraxians that we're not easy prey." "Yeah." Jake's voice was hollow. "I guess I did. Do you want me to stay on the line? So you're not alone?" Alone. Jake almost laughed. He'd been alone for 3 years. What difference would 4 more minutes make? But he found himself saying, "Yeah, that would be good." They sat in silence. Jake watched the countdown. Hayes must have been watching her own sensors, seeing the same numbers, knowing there was nothing she could do. 3 minutes. "Jake," Hayes said. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why engineering? Why choose such a lonely posting out here?" Jake considered the question. The real answer was complicated, painful. But with 3 minutes left, what did it matter? I lost my wife and daughter 3 years ago. Transport accident. Mechanical failure. After that, I couldn't stand being around people. Couldn't stand the questions, the sympathy, the way everyone looked at me like I might break. Machines made sense. Machines had rules. So I came out here where it was just me and the systems I understood. I'm sorry, Hayes said. That's a hard loss. The Vraxians made me feel something again. Made me angry. Made me fight. Maybe that's worth something. 2 minutes. Jake stood up. His legs were stiff. He walked to the window one more time. The Vraxian fleet was barely visible now. Tiny dots accelerating toward the edge of sensor range, running from one broken engineer and his improvised bomb. He thought about Amy. About how she'd asked him once what he did at work. He'd tried to explain engineering, how he kept the systems running, how he made sure everything worked properly. She'd looked confused and asked, "But what's the fun part?" "The fun part?" Jake smiled sadly. "There was no fun part, baby girl. Just responsibility and maintenance and making sure nothing broke. Just keeping the darkness at bay one system at a time. But today he'd done something different. Today he'd used those same systems to fight back. To protect, to matter. Maybe Amy would have understood that. Maybe she would have been proud. 1 minute, Jake." Hayes' voice was tight now. "I'm reading critical failure in your containment system. You need to get to an escape pod now." "No time," Jake said. Still lying. The escape pod was 3 minutes away. He had 60 seconds. The math didn't work and Hayes probably knew it, but she didn't call him on it. "Then I'll stay with you. You won't be alone." 30 seconds. Jake looked around the engineering bay one last time. His home for 3 years. The place he'd hidden. The place he'd finally stopped hiding. "Captain Hayes? I'm here. Tell Earth that Jake Morrison didn't surrender. Tell them he went down fighting. Tell them humanity doesn't give up. I will. I swear it." 20 seconds. Jake closed his eyes. He thought about Helen's laugh, Amy's smile, family dinners and birthday parties and all the ordinary moments that he'd taken for granted until they were gone. He thought about how the universe had taken everything from him, and how he'd finally taken something back. 10 seconds. "Goodbye, Jake Morrison," Hayes said softly. "Rest well." "Goodbye, Captain." 5 seconds. Jake Morrison, chief engineer of Kepler Station, waited for the end. No fear, no regret, just a quiet acceptance that this was how his story ended. Not with a whimper, not with surrender, with fury. 3 seconds. The containment field collapsed. Matter and antimatter met. The explosion started at the subatomic level and expanded at a significant fraction of light speed. Kepler Station ceased to exist. The blast wave expanded outward like a newborn star. It caught 2 Vraxian ships that hadn't quite made it to safe distance. Their shields lasted less than a second before the vessels simply vaporized. On the Defender, Captain Hayes watched her sensors as the explosion registered. She closed her eyes and said a quiet prayer for the engineer who'd chosen death over surrender. The explosion's light reached across 3 star systems. Ships turned to watch. Colonies detected the energy signature. Earth's military command received the automated transmission that Jake had programmed. His final message. His final lesson to humanity. One person could make a difference. One person could stop a fleet. One person's fury could change the course of a war. In the Vraxian command ship, war leader Kresh watched the destruction of Kepler Station. He'd lost 47 soldiers, 2 warships, a strategic position, all because of one human engineer who refused to evacuate. Kresh entered a new report into the collective's strategic database. A warning for future campaigns, a notation that would change how the Vraxians viewed humanity. Humans are not rational opponents. They will sacrifice everything to deny us victory. They will weaponize their own infrastructure. They will die rather than surrender. Forward operations into human space are not recommended. Cost exceeds strategic value. The report was marked urgent and transmitted to the collective's high command. Within hours, Vraxian forces began withdrawing from the border systems. The invasion of human space was postponed indefinitely. 1 engineer, 1 station, 1 explosion, and an entire war changed direction. Jake Morrison's name spread through human space like wildfire. The man who held off a fleet with no weapons, who fought back with nothing but his knowledge and his anger.